Traps are an important part of Eternal Return. They can help neutralize a bad matchup or help you hit a difficult skill shot. What's poppin' everyone, it's your boy Levi, and we're going to be looking at how to use traps effectively. Stick around until the end of the video and I will show you how you can counter someone else using traps. Let's start off by going over the fundamentals of traps. Traps can be utilized by every character in Eternal Return. There's no limitations. Some characters use traps better than others. An example of this is Isol. His passive allows him to remember the position of traps that gets placed, as well as instantly put them down. Traps typically have a placement time and can be used to neutralize bad matchups, zone off an area, help you take objectives quickly, and assist you in a final zone. Throughout the video, we'll go over each scenario and what trap you would want to use for each. But for now, traps can be broken down into 3 categories. The first category we'll call movement traps. These traps typically don't do much damage, but will restrict the movement of your enemies. These traps are Mines, Pendulum Axe, Hidden Maidens, Sting Burst, Double Guillotine, and Claymore. These traps either slow, root, or stun opponents. The second category we'll call damage traps. These traps explode for large amounts of damage but don't have a way of keeping opponents inside them. These traps are RDX, fire traps, C4, smart bombs, and remote mines. The last category we're just going to call the everything else category. These are traps that you'll probably look to upgrade or will only use if you happen to have them in your inventory. You'll probably never craft these. These traps are any of the white and green traps as well as mithril string. I will make a note about clan cladders. They're a unique trap that when they're activated, they will cause a ping on the map. So far, I've never once seen them utilized effectively, but feel free to let me know down below what your experience with them is. Let's quickly talk about what a good trap is and a bad trap. A bad trap is any trap that's in your inventory when you die. You can pretty much always find a use for traps, even if it's not used optimally. They won't ever really hurt to have. Not using a trap because you were saving it for late game and you die before you get a chance to use it is the only bad trap. If you're a newer player, you can be using them to get through the game rather than to win the game. I will warn you, there is a bit of a consensus around using traps in normal games, but it's usually directed towards creators and high elo players. Don't let it bother you, it's part of the game. Traps have a base damage, but that's not indicative of how much damage they do. Because they do true damage, that's just a good basis at where they start at. Trap damage is increased by 3% per every level of trap mastery. Trap mastery can be increased by making traps, setting traps, taking and dealing damage from traps, or dealing damage to animals with traps. Yes, animals can trigger traps, so be careful where you place them. Also, quick side note again, Isol's ultimate does count as a trap. On the placement of traps, let's talk about how to typically position them. Movement traps are typically used to create picks. You want to set these up in front of you so that when a player runs into them, you can unload your abilities into them. Next, I'll show you some examples of how movement traps can be used. Here's an example of me holding a zone that's about to close against a Cathy. I unfortunately don't get the kill, but you get the idea. Damage traps you typically want to place behind you and kite into them. If you place them in front of you, a lot of players will instinctively run away and avoid getting hit. You want them to commit to fighting you. In the past, some characters were able to incorporate traps into their combo. However, the arming time has been increased and you can no longer do this on most characters. The only one that's still in the game is Isol placing his ultimate on top of a trap. The arm time for a trap is too high for Nathapon to put a trap down under his ultimate, Elena to put a trap down mid-freeze, and Daniel put a trap down mid-ultimate. Honestly, this is for the better, but if you find any trap combos that are still available, let me know down in the comments. When it comes down to the final zone, you can use either type of trap. Both of them will help you. Place movement traps around your final square to avoid getting engaged on. If another player walks into one of them, it's likely they will get targeted if there's more players around. Damage traps will help you secure kills or turn the tide of a fight. They also have a pretty good chance of lasting a third-party kill if 2 people fight over it. Earlier I mentioned I would talk about how to play around traps if your opponent has them. If your character is a poke character, or likes to play from range, or kills very slowly, you'll want to utilize cameras. Place them around you so you can destroy traps before you fight your opponent. One thing I want to mention is that you should get a feel for how far you can see traps with the cameras. People seriously underestimate how far the range of a camera is. You don't have to put them right next to the trap to see it. They can be pretty far away, and honestly, sometimes you can even get away with putting them behind you so that you can defend them. If you're a melee character or an all-in character that would get punished for walking up and trying to destroy a trap, you'll want to utilize EMP drones. These will disable traps and make it so you can freely walk over them. When the EMP drone expires, the traps will rearm, and that's why I recommend cameras if you can't kill quickly. If this tip helped you, consider leaving a like and subscribe. It helps me out. There are also traps that you can pull off using your game knowledge rather than the actual trap items. Recently, I did a live stream called Play Like a Pro where we spectated a top Eternal Return player and see what strategies they do to win games. For episode 1, we spectated Frankie Doodle. Late into a game, Frankie noticed that both pawn and hospital were closing. He camped the pawn hospital exit because he knew someone had taken the gold box in pawn, meaning that there was at least one person in there. With the zones closing, and that being the closest hyperloop, he knew his opponent had to walk that way. Now, it didn't end up resulting in a kill due to some quick reactions from Bernice, but this is just an example of how you can set a vision trap for unsuspecting players. From setting up an ambush to baiting your opponents in, traps are an essential part of closing out games. But you'll have to do more than just that. Click or tap the screen now to be taken to the video on how to play the late game of Eternal Return. It's part of my complete beginner's guide to Eternal Return series.